Unexpectedly forced into marriage, she discovered the amazing truth about her poor husband. Emily could hardly believe the words that had just spilled from her cousin's lips, an accusation about Mike's family that turned her world upside down. It twisted in her gut, a mix of disbelief and anger swirling through her. This Thanksgiving, amid laughter and the aroma of turkey, her family had turned a joyous occasion into a battlefield of class and expectations. How had it come to this? Just months earlier, she had been swept off her feet by a man whose laughter made her heart race and whose modest lifestyle felt like a refreshingly gentle embrace from the harsh, competitive world she knew all too well. As a teacher in the quaint town of Willow Creek, she devoted herself to her students, finding solace in their innocent dreams. But voices of doubt haunted her now, whispering that love might not be enough. Was she truly ready to stand against her family's disappointment? A desire for acceptance grappled with her burgeoning love for Mike. The sheer weight of tradition smothered her like the autumn leaves piled in her yard. Mike was just a mechanic, divorced from the wealth that surrounded her. When they had married, it was amidst excitement and unanswered questions her heart convinced, even as her mind whirled in uncertainty. And now this rumor had ignited an inferno, a simple man's past pressed against her genteel upbringing. Before we continue, I need to tell you about something important that's happening. YouTube has been making changes to the system and many people are losing notifications from channels they follow. If you're enjoying the content, click the bell and mark all notifications so you don't miss the next videos. And if you can leave a like, it really helps with reach. Seriously, it makes a difference. Oh, tell me in the comments where you're watching from. I'm always curious to know who's on the other side of the screen. Now let's continue. Confusion clouded her mind on the drive back home. She winced as Mike's face grew grave, reflecting a depth of concern she wasn't prepared to confront. She needed to protect him, yet the very essence of their bond seemed to teeter on the edge, wavering between the realness of love and the illusion of status. Moments where they would laugh together felt marred by the looming shadow of a legacy that Mike had kept secret, a legacy that could shatter everything they had built. A sudden thought pierced her heart. Would her family ever accept Mike, or would they be as unforgiving as the rumors suggested? All at once, she longed for them to see him in the light she saw him, a man of integrity and warmth, but fear clawed at her thoughts like a predatory creature hiding within her. What if her family's disdain festered into something more malignant? She had fought hard to navigate the complexities of her own insecurities as a person. Now how could she shield Mike from their judgment? Then one chilly autumn afternoon, as she sifted through some old items Mike had inherited from his father, she stumbled across a box that whispered secrets. The patent that lay inside lit her curiosity afire, a revolutionary tool that had the potential to change their town's economy forever. A wave of confusion washed over her. How could he be so talented, so extraordinary, after all their conversations about modest upbringing? Did she even know him at all? The cracks were forming, and thoughts spiraled out of control. She stood at the precipice of doubt, love wrestling against the constraints of reputation. To make things worse, David, a rival of Mike, stood ready to exploit their vulnerability, eager to create a rift that could destroy everything. Could she fight? Could the purity of their love withstand the onslaught? As she clutched the patent tightly, her breath hitched in her throat. She was left facing a disquieting truth. Could she protect what they had in a world that demanded conformity? A threatening message arrived just as she turned to Mike, bringing forth the ultimate test of their love and resolve. Would they rise above, or would the weight of legacy crush them? Emily's world hung in delicate balance, the gentle hum of the approaching twilight whispering doubts into her heart. The patent lay heavy in her hands, each line on the paper striking her as a testament to Mike's hidden brilliance. Was he truly the man she thought she had married? Questions spiraled in her mind, an emotional tempest she couldn't shake off. When they returned home, she felt an unsettling mixture of determination and fear. The warmth of their small living room seemed stifling rather than comforting. The flickering flames in the fireplace mirrored the flickers of doubt within her, illuminating the shadows that were closing in. Would he dismiss her concerns or lash out in anger? She felt the reins of her life slipping, and yet the urge to confront the truth became more compelling. "Mike," she began, her voice trembling slightly, "I found something today. Something about your father. The words tumbled out, revealing her vulnerability. She could only hope he would grasp her intention, that she sought not to accuse but to understand. He turned from the sink, where he was washing his hands, eyebrows knitted together in concern. What is it? His voice was gentle, but the glimmer of anxiety in his eyes told her all she needed to know. He feared she had uncovered a darker secret. The patent, she pushed through clenched teeth, the one for the revolutionary tool. She hesitated. Why didn't you tell me about this? Is it true that your family is wealthier than I thought? Silence enveloped the room, wrapping around them like tendrils of smoke. Mike's face paled slightly, as if she had stripped away layers of protection. She could see the conflict wrestling within him, a storm caught between pride and an almost suffocating need to shield her from his past. I didn't want you to judge me based on something I did not achieve myself, he finally said, his voice barely above a whisper. That tool, it was my father's legacy, not mine. I am just a mechanic. The pain in his expression struck her with the force of a tidal wave. He was ashamed of a heritage he had never asked for, yet here she was holding it, the very embodiment of who he could be. Who you could be. She echoed mentally. A realization sparked within her. What if Mike's father had poured immense talent and ingenuity into a legacy he had never gotten to see him take ownership of? What if the real test was not just for their relationship, but for both of them to redefine their identities in the face of adversity? Deep breaths filled her with courage. You are more than just a mechanic. This is an opportunity to explore the potential your father envisioned. We could fight this rumor together. Confront David and the others. Fight? And how do you suppose we do that? His skepticism stung, yet it was familiar. Years of playing small had turned into instinct for him. All I have is grease and tools. Your family won't care for my inventions. No, but they care for me, she insisted, summoning her resolve. And I care for you. Her heart pounded, the clarity of her feelings sharpening every word. Yet, just as the air seemed to thicken with possibility, a second message arrived. Her phone buzzed ominously, pulling her focus. Looking down, she realized it was from the same unknown number that had rattled her earlier. Back off, or you'll see just how far David will go. Fear chilled her, but indignation replaced it swiftly. They were not just fighting for acceptance but against manipulation and fear. Would they bend or break under the mounting pressure? Mike, she said, meeting his gaze steadily, it's time we faced this together. We need a plan. And as the shadows of doubt threatened to envelop them, Emily felt a deep-seated determination rising within her. She had to prepare herself for the battles ahead, not only for the love they shared, but to help Mike reclaim his narrative. A decisive moment was approaching. The time had come to face David and to unearth the truth behind the whispers that could shatter them, or forge something stronger in its wake. Would she be the beacon, guiding them both through the storm? Emily's mind raced as the last words lingered in the air, intertwined with the thick tension that had settled in their living room. She could feel her pulse quicken, driven by the urgency of the moment. A plan needed to form, not merely as a reaction to the threats against them, but as a step toward reclaiming her husband's fractured identity and their shared future. Okay, she said, her voice steadying as she embraced the weight of the looming confrontation. Let us start with the basics. We need to assess what we have and what we can do. Mike leaned against the countertop, arms crossed defensively. What do you mean what we can do? I'm just a mechanic, remember? His skepticism hung in the air like stale smoke, but she could see a flicker of something in his eyes, perhaps hope, or the dawning realization that he might not have to bear this burden alone. You're right, Mike, she insisted, stepping closer. But you're more than just that. Let us break this down. We know your father's legacy is at play here. We should dig deeper into the actual patent, see what the repercussions of David's actions could be. I mean, what if this is a chance not just for you but to prove something to everyone, even to yourself? The transformed glances exchanged between them sparked something new, a connection that was previously overshadowed by insecurity. They began brainstorming ideas together, their voices rising and falling with excitement. Emily seized the opportunity to map out a strategy. "Let us document everything," she suggested. "We can gather evidence, try to understand the patent's implications, and perhaps consult someone in the field who could help us navigate this labyrinth of legalities." Mike watched her, a mix of admiration and disbelief etched across his features. The flickers of doubt that had bound him for too long were slowly being cast aside by the flame of determination ignited in Emily. She paused for a brief moment, reflecting on the path they were about to take, filled with potential yet riddled with dangers. "And I've got connections," Emily continued, her mind racing. "I could reach out to my father's legal team. They might have insight on how we can counteract whatever David is scheming." The name David made Mike stiffen. "Are you sure? He's already made it clear he's willing to terrify us into silence," he replied, discomfort weaving back into his tone. Emily took a breath, weighing the risks that accompanied her next statement. "Yes, but your father's patent and your heritage are at stake." She leaned closer, her voice dropping to a conspiratorial whisper. "What if we turn the tables? We don't let him intimidate us. Instead, we become proactive. Seek advice, prepare for what comes next." A visible shift occurred in Mike's demeanor. The resigned mechanic slowly began to transform into someone who could reclaim agency over his life and potential. "You really believe this can work?" he asked, vulnerability lacing his question. "Mike," she replied, searching his eyes, "if we stand together, challenge what we've always taken for granted about ourselves, then we might just carve our own path." In this moment of clarity, surrounded by the familiar yet now powerful scent of resolve that filled the room, Emily felt herself gripping her deepest truth. The thoughts ignited within her. This was no longer about mere survival. It was about asserting their existence in a world that sought to define them by others' expectations. As they began outlining their plan, the phone buzzed again, a harsh reminder that their battle was far from over. Emily glanced at the screen. Another message from that unknown number. "What does it say?" Mike's voice was strained, but it held an edge, a subtle strength that hadn't been there before. Her fingers trembled slightly as she typed. "It seems David has eyes everywhere. He's watching us, and he won't stop until we back down." Their eyes met, determination solidifying the air around them. This was not simply a struggle against an antagonist, it had become their crucible, the test that would forge them anew. As they plotted their next steps, Emily felt the weight lift slightly, replaced by the anticipation of discovery. The moment of action was imminent, yet uncertainty lingered. They both stood at the precipice of what lay ahead, a confrontation more significant than they could comprehend. Would they be strong enough to face their adversary, or would the looming shadows of David's threats consume them? The battle was escalating, and the outcome remained unclear, but Emily would not falter. Together, they would claim their narrative, one calculated move at a time. Emily's heart raced as she stared at the phone in her hand, the weight of the unknown message pulling at her stomach. The implied threat behind it was palpable, and she felt almost suffocated by the reality that David had penetrated their little sanctuary. Yet alongside that fear, there was a burgeoning sense of clarity. Action was required, and she wouldn't let them falter. "Let us think this through logically," she began, grounding her thoughts. "If David has eyes on us, he's expecting us to cower. We need to turn that expectation around. What can we do now that would catch him off guard?" Mike's brow furrowed, skepticism returning momentarily. "You want to play into his hand, only in reverse." "Exactly," she replied, frustration bubbling up. "This isn't just about evading David. It's about our future. We need to demonstrate that we're a united front, that we won't be manipulated. We shouldn't wait until he makes the next move. We must act first." "Alright, so what exactly do we do?" he asked, arms uncrossing as he fought against his instinct to retreat. Emily stood taller, feeling the blend of fear and courageous determination start to shape her resolve. "We collect everything we know about the patent. We need to understand its value and claim our rights. And more importantly, we need an ally, she declared, her mind racing with possibilities. Let us leverage my father's connections. They have dealt with legal matters like this before. Mike hesitated, a ghost of doubt flickering across his face. What if your father refuses to help? What if this blows up in our faces? What if David finds out? She stepped forward, her voice steady and fierce. Then we prepare for that eventuality. We gather all our facts, and we learn the ins and outs of the patent law. If he wants a fight, we'll be ready. We can't control what David does, but we can control our response. As they spoke, Emily felt the tiny flame of her own latent skills begin to spark. The years spent managing her father's business affairs, the legal documents she had pored over, the projects she had spearheaded, all her experiences coalesced into a rapidly growing sense of capability. The fear of uncertainty became fuel. She would no longer be just the supportive partner, she would be a driving force. Let us reach out first thing tomorrow, Emily said decisively. We'll present our findings, get insights on our next steps, and fully map out a strategic plan. What if he doesn't see this as a priority? Mike questioned, still grappling with the enormity of their situation. Then we make him see. We present it as urgent, timely. We craft an angle that compels him to act, Emily countered, suppressing her growing frustration. She could sense Mike's internal struggle, affirming his fears of being overwhelmed as they trod into unfamiliar territory. A newfound determination settled in his square jaw. You really believe we can do this? Absolutely, Mike. You may see yourself as just a mechanic, but this is about far more than the past. I know you're capable of so much more. Your father's legacy is tied to your identity, and pressing forward is already half the battle. He nodded slowly, the fight in him rekindled, the embers of his self-confidence stoking with every word she spoke. As they began drafting their initial email to her father's legal team, Emily's mind filled with the prospect of what lay ahead. Confrontations, unraveling truths, and the pursuit of justice loomed ever larger on their horizon. But in that moment of determination, a revealing thought pierced through. What if David had already countered and prepared for their next steps? The notion sent a wave of unease coursing through her veins, intense enough to shake her focus for just a moment. The clock ticked steadily, offering an auditory reminder of time slipping away. As midnight approached, the feeling that they were at a tipping point shaped every move they made, the air thick with a sense of both opportunity and peril. Tomorrow would bring the potential for clarity or chaos, and Emily wondered if she was brave enough to embrace the full scale of what lay between them and their emerging future. Just as they finished their draft, a loud thump echoed from the door, jarring them into an immediate silence. What awaited them on the other side of that door? Emily flinched at the sudden noise, her mind racing as scenarios flashed through her thoughts. Was it David? Had he followed them home? Or perhaps it was just the wind, a benign explanation that did little to quell her mind's spiraling doubts. Should we check? Mike whispered, his voice laced with apprehension. Panic threatened to paralyze her, but she steadied her breath, steeling herself against the anxiety that threatened to bubble up again. Yes. Stay close, she replied, pushing the unease to the back of her mind. Driven by an urgent need for answers, they approached the door cautiously. Each step felt like an eternity. When she finally grasped the doorknob, her stomach churned with unshakable dread. Drawing courage from the resolve they forged in their earlier conversation, she turned it and swung the door open. To her surprise, nothing was there. Just the empty hallway, dimly lit and silent. For a fleeting moment, relief washed over her, yet she couldn't shake the feeling that a storm loomed on the horizon. I'll check outside, Mike suggested, moving past her and peeking down the corridor, scanning every shadow in search of a threat. Emily's heart pounded as she listened to the faint sounds of the building, ambient noises of life that felt so starkly at odds with their current crisis. Stay safe, she called after him, suddenly feeling the weight of the situation crash down on her again as the door swung shut, leaving her alone. The solitude gave her an opportunity to reflect. Was she truly prepared for what lay ahead? Debates swirled in her mind. She had always relied on Mike, half burdened, half reassured by his presence. But the more she challenged herself in the face of adversity, the clearer her responsibility had become. Tomorrow was pivotal. She would need to decide her own role without relying on Mike as her shield. As Mike returned, Emily's gaze locked onto him with a newfound focus. The vulnerability that had once resided in her heart was shifting into something else, a burn of determination that sparked from within. "We need to act tonight," she said firmly, her voice steady. "We can't wait for the morning. Let us gather everything we have on the patent. We start unearthing the allegations right now." Mike's uncertainty was palpable, but he nodded in agreement, pushed by her conviction. They hurried back to their workspace, unfurling their efforts with an urgency that seemed to awaken the team spirit. The neat piles of documents that had once felt overwhelming now radiated a sense of purpose as they began to sift through them with renewed vigor. Emily unearthed legal documents related to the patent, her pulse quickening as she scanned line after line. "We need to trace ownership back to when it started. Find out who signed what and any discrepancies along the way," she instructed, her voice taking on a commanding tone that felt surprisingly comfortable. Hours turned into a blur, and as the clock crept towards 2 a.m., fatigue began to gnaw at her concentration. But with each revelation emerged a layer of Emily that had long been dormant, a woman who was not only the daughter of a successful businessman but also a capable individual in her own right. As the pieces began to fit together, she felt a sense of empowerment. The fear of David started transforming into motivation. Then, just as she pieced together a particularly elusive signature, an email notification popped up on her screen. With trembling fingers, she opened it. The subject line paralyzed her: your latest correspondence. It was from her father's lawyer. What did it say? Mike asked, peering over her shoulder, the exhaustion fading away as curiosity peaked. "It's not good. He wants to discuss our claims," she read, a growing sense of dread pushing at her once more. But as she scanned down to the end, something sharp and cold seized her heart. "And David has been notified of the impending action against him." Emily froze, realizing they had stepped into a war without realizing the full extent of the threat awaiting them. In the shadows of their small office, with her heart pounding in her ears, a new fear gripped her. What had they set in motion? The door slamming back in the wind suddenly took on new meaning. David was already one step ahead, and she could almost hear the clock ticking down on their resolve. Tomorrow might be too late, she murmured, a chill skimming her spine. The battle had begun, but Emily had no idea just how fierce the consequences would become. Emily felt the air around her thicken with tension, suffocating against the weight of uncertainty. As fatigue pressed down like an anchor, she could feel the flickering embers of her determination smoldering within. This was no longer about the patent or the implications of their discovery, it was about her newfound identity, forged by circumstance, but no less powerful. "You know, we're going to need real evidence if we're going to take this further," she said, her voice steady despite the rapid beat of her heart. "Only whispers won't take down a man like him. We need hard proof." Her words resonated in the cold room, awakening a sense of purpose that had been absent just hours before. Mike, rifling through the papers, paused and nodded. "Yeah, you're right. Let us find something concrete, something indisputable." She watched him, a strange admiration warming her resolve. Once a mere ally, Mike was morphing into a partner of sorts, one who seemed to respect her newfound strength, even if he couldn't entirely follow her lead yet. The night unfolded as they dived deeper into the labyrinth of legal documents. With each passing hour, they pieced together the narrative that had been obscured beneath legal jargon and red tape. Emily's ambition swelled with every new piece of evidence. She was discovering that she didn't need Mike's validation to pursue this path. "I think I found something," she called out excitedly, her voice a sharp contrast to the gravity of the situation. It was a contractual amendment dated 5 years prior. It showed David's business colluding with another prominent firm, many shady dealings hidden behind corporate smiles. "Where do you find that?" Mike asked, leaning in closer, his interest apparent. "Right here beneath all this." She pointed to the pile of neglected files. If we could prove collusion, it could change everything. With a sudden surge of adrenaline, she began to map out the implications, considering legal strategies that had eluded her before. Was she really capable of going against someone like David? The question clawed at her. Yet with each revelation, she realized that her fear of inadequacy was slowly being overridden by a fierce advocacy for justice, not just for herself, but for countless others who might be crushed under David's ambition. "Emily," Mike ventured cautiously, "are you sure about this? We could become targets. Let him come after us. I'm tired of being afraid. Tired of being the phantom in my own life." Each word stung with an honesty she had previously hidden. Late into the night, she battled waves of self-doubt, forcing them down like a dam breaking against relentless water. Her computer screen flickered continuously, a digital beacon illuminating her path. She was no longer just her father's daughter, nor Mike's assistant. She was forging her own destiny, wholly and undeniably. Suddenly, an alert popped up on her screen, sending her heart racing anew. It was a fresh notification, an urgent request for a meeting from her father's lawyer tomorrow. "Emily, what now?" Mike asked, his voice filled with concern. "Now, we prepare," she decided. Her voice was unwavering, an anchor amidst the chaos. "We put everything we have on the table. We can't let David intimidate us into silence." As they huddled over the documents one last time, a quiet determination settled between them. A plan was forming in Emily's mind, one that required courage and tenacity, but above all, a willingness to trust herself. She locked eyes with Mike, seeing in him not just a collaborator, but a confidant aligned with her new mission. The dawn of tomorrow felt immensely daunting, but with it came the promise of a confrontation that could redefine everything. As Emily closed her eyes, she was vaguely aware of the shift within her. She had crossed a threshold. But looming above all decisions was a pernicious uncertainty. What would her father's lawyer say, and what consequences could arise from their decision to act? As sleep threatened to take her, a new question loomed: had they unwittingly put themselves in a position far deeper than they could fathom? As the morning sun crept through the blinds, Emily stirred, feeling the day's weight pressing into her bones. She blinked against the brightness, each ray of light amplifying her anxiety. Today wouldn't be just a meeting, it would be a defining moment, a test grounding her accelerated evolution. She was no longer just reactive but was determined to reclaim agency over her life. After a quick shower and a strong cup of coffee, Emily sat at her kitchen table, surrounded by documents and notes. Slots of time opened for contemplation, and she began to visualize their approach. Scrutinizing each detail, she realized that honing their strategy would reveal her growth not merely in legal understanding but in embracing her role as a leader. The collusion evidence was damning, but how they presented it was just as critical. She scribbled down the main points they needed to convey: the timeline, the implications, and the urgency of their findings. Her heart raced as her thoughts crystallized. She felt an electrifying charge of adrenaline echo through her veins. Hadn't she always been passive? Now she was breaking down barriers, crafting a narrative rather than simply accepting her position on the sidelines. When they finally met with her father's lawyer, Emily's nerves twisted impatiently. She had envisioned the scene 100 times, yet the weight of expectation weighed heavily on her shoulders. The polished office space felt cold, a stark contrast to the warmth of her determination. As they entered the small conference room, the atmosphere shifted. The lawyer had an air of authority that made Emily acutely aware of her own stature. "Good morning, Emily," he said, glancing at the mountain of evidence parked on the table. "I see you've brought your findings." "Yes, I have," she said, her words steady, though her pulse quickened. The lawyer raised an eyebrow, his skepticism palpable. Perhaps he didn't expect much from her. That realization smoldered in her, fueling her resolve. She launched into her presentation, illustrating the fraudulent deals while covering the implications of their findings. Mike interjected occasionally, but Emily sensed that the moment belonged to her. The rhythm of her voice rose and fell like a symphony, each point gaining complexity. She could see the lawyer's demeanor begin to shift. Realization was dawning on him. I need to ask, he interrupted her flow. Are you prepared for the repercussions of this? The question unnerved her, conditioning her risk assessment. Emily faltered but quickly regained her footing. I understand the risks. But doing nothing feels far more dangerous. As she spoke, she felt the deep-rooted fear of being overpowered begin to dissolve. The lawyer's penetrating gaze softened slightly. You might want to consider your position more carefully. Going against David is no simple affair. Emily glanced at Mike, who offered a reassuring nod. It felt like an unspoken agreement. She had the right to challenge the status quo, to defend not just her interests but all who had suffered under corporate malfeasance. In this moment, she was more than her father's daughter, she was a force to be reckoned with. Once the meeting concluded, she stepped out into the hallway, her chest swelling with profound strength. We need to act quickly, she told Mike, glancing at the clock. If we wait, we may lose the momentum we've built. Yet beneath her newfound zeal, doubt slipped in again. Had the lawyer seen her strength or merely her desperation? The anxiety of impending conflict with David trailed closely behind her. A voice in her mind whispered doubts about her readiness to face him head-on. As they made plans for their next steps, Emily found a stark solace in her discontent. She could negotiate this treacherous terrain, gathering her determination into a shield for whatever lay ahead. The stakes were rising, and she felt alive amidst the uncertainty. Then something better crossed her mind. A surge of instinct buried any remaining hesitation. Mike, what if we went directly to the media? The shock of her suggestion hung in the air as they met with a blend of fear and exhilaration. Images of David's empire crumbling built vivid pictures in her mind, one that danced tantalizingly close to liberation. Was it too risky, too far-fetched? Mike's silence weighed heavily, forcing Emily's heartbeat to surge again. Maybe this was the path that would cement her transformation. She was done being complacent. The time had come to turn her vulnerabilities into vehement strength. Her heart pounded in anticipation, her soul revolting against caution. As they stood at this threshold, Emily realized she had come to a pivotal juncture. A choice presented itself. Would she base her action on fear or leap into the unknown with fierce conviction? The question lingered, charged with possibility. A new path unfolded before her. Would she seize it or allow her chance for true change to slip away? Emily paced the small living room, her mind a whirlwind of possibilities as she waited for Mike to process her bold suggestion. The air seemed thicker with tension, a feeling of fate tangling itself around them like ivy. She knew exposing David's malfeasance would not be a walk in the park. It was a gamble that could alter everything: her relationship with her father, her career, even her very identity. Yet, the intoxicating allure of taking that chance seeped into her veins, overshadowing her apprehensions. What if we did go to the media? Emily pressed, her voice a blend of insistence and anticipation. We have the evidence, real, hard proof. We could expose the entire operation before they can silence us. Mike finally broke his silence, though his doubt loomed like a shadow. It's risky, Emily. David has connections. He won't just stand by and let this happen. Exactly. That's why waiting is a mistake, she retorted passionately. If we let him dictate the pace, we might lose our chance entirely. Her pulse raced as she envisioned a world where she didn't just get by but fought fiercely against the weight of intimidation. For too long, she had been a passive player in a game that demanded decisive action. Okay, but we need a solid plan, Mike replied, folding his arms as he leaned against the wall. We can't just tell anyone anything. We need to be strategic. Emily assessed his expression, his apprehension mixed with the undeniable spark of excitement. The energy shared between them was a budding partnership, and she felt herself drawing strength from it. Then let us outline a strategy, she said, now filled with purpose. We locate journalists who specialize in corporate crime. We draft our story, compile evidence, and build a narrative that frames David as an empire built on corruption. As they brainstormed, her confidence expanded, stretching the limits of what she thought was possible. She considered each connection it was a web of allies waiting to be activated, friends in journalism and legal circles who could amplify their voices. They scribbled down names, outlining key points that could pique the interest of editors and news anchors alike. Emily's mind danced with possibilities, intertwining ambition and a newfound sense of duty. The weight of her father's legacy was transforming. It was no longer a burden but a rallying call for justice. She was stepping into the light, shedding the grips of fear that had held her for so long. Yet as the plans unfolded, another shadow flitted through her thoughts. What if David retaliated in ways that could hurt her? The uncertainty gnawed at her, but she forced it aside, focusing instead on the prospect of empowering herself and others. "Let us call some journalists," she said, the words tumbling out before she could lose her nerve. "If we get the right people on board, we'll be unstoppable." Mike hesitated, the moment stretching taut. "All right, but if we do this, there's no turning back. Are you ready for that?" The gravity of his question anchored her. This time, the answer was resolute. "I am. I'm ready to confront my father. To be unapologetically me." The decision crystallized, a moment etched in her consciousness. She wasn't just challenging David, she was challenging an identity molded by expectations, a role that had left her feeling powerless for far too long. With every word exchanged, she felt the chains of her past begin to rust away, liberating her. As the evening shadows lengthened, the urgency of their mission electrified the stagnant atmosphere. Plans materialized like designs on a blank canvas, vibrant with ambition and pulse. Emily felt invigorated not just by the prospect of revolutionizing her lineage but by the fire igniting within her spirit. But as they concluded their strategy session, her thoughts lingered on the path ahead, a tumultuous endeavor fraught with risk stoked by intrinsic stakes. Would this audacious plan mark her ascent into unapologetic strength, or would it tear her down as she faced the wrath of her father, the boundaries of her reality blurred, and the weight of what lay ahead pressed against her? A truth dawned: every step forward was a dance with vulnerability, revealing her tenacity and daring her to transcend the past. The moment was ripe for confrontation. As she gathered her resolve, Emily posed a thought that hung in the air, charged with impending conflict, galvanizing what could be a defining moment of clarity. "Mike," she said, pausing to measure each syllable, "what if confronting David becomes our final act of defiance against his empire?" The question resonated between them like a drumbeat, an echo of possibility drumming in the depths of her heart. Would they be ready to face him, to enter the lioness' den, and confront all that he represented? The moment of truth was drawing near, and Emily wasn't sure whether she feared it or longed for it. The following day, Emily awoke to the subtle light filtering through her bedroom window, a reminder that today was pivotal. The weight of her decision hung in the air, palpable and pressing. She had promised herself that there would be no backing down, yet a flicker of self-doubt threatened to creep in, whispering that the journey ahead might consume her. As she sipped her black coffee, Emily's thoughts raced. She needed clarity and composure. Calling the journalists wasn't just a professional move, it was deeply personal. She was advocating not just for the exposure of David's corruption but also for her own liberation from the constraints of her family's expectations. Perhaps she could curate a narrative that reflected the woman she wanted to become, one who fought for what was right, even at great personal risk. The buzzing of her phone snapped her from her reverie. It was Mike. "Ready to make some calls?" he asked, his voice a mix of enthusiasm and trepidation. "Absolutely," Emily replied, her resolve hardening with each passing second. They had spent the previous evening compiling a strategy, gathering evidence, and outlining the most compelling angles for their story. Now it was time to put their plan into action. As they sat down with the first journalist, a young woman named Sarah known for her investigative reporting, Emily felt a surge of anticipation. They trained their sights on the present moment to push through the noise of their fears. Without hesitation, Emily dove into the pitch, laying out the facts with meticulous detail. "This is more than a story," she asserted, her voice firm. "This is about the ramifications that trickle down to every individual in this city, about the real people whose lives have been affected by this corruption." Sarah's eyes lit up, clearly captivated by Emily's fervor. Emily could feel the remnants of her old self, the one who shied away from confrontation, slowly dissipating. In that office, her narrative transformed into something larger than herself. With every shared detail, every reaction from Sarah, a new version of Emily began to take shape, confident, assertive, driven. She was no longer the daughter of a once revered businessman but a formidable voice for justice. As they concluded their meeting, Sarah leaned back, impressed. "I want to investigate this further. We could start by corroborating your claims and reaching out to potential whistleblowers." The victory was sweet, but with it came the bitter taste of potential repercussions. While Emily's heart raced with excitement, her mind painted grim portraits of possible retaliation. Would David retaliate? Would the media frenzy she hoped to ignite become a storm that engulfed her life? That uncertainty loomed, yet the taste of empowerment was intoxicating. Emily and Mike drove home in silence, each consumed by the magnitude of what they had just set in motion. The evening stretched before them like an unwritten chapter filled with infinite possibilities and daunting challenges. What's next? Mike finally broke the silence, his brow furrowed in thought. "We prepare for the worst," Emily replied, determination replacing any trace of fear. "We fortify ourselves against whatever comes next. This isn't just about David anymore, it's about every person who feels trapped in a situation that undermines their integrity." As the sun dipped below the horizon, painting the sky in shades of violet and gold, Emily felt an exhilarating combination of fear and exhilaration coursing through her. She stood on the precipice of something monumental, her heart pounding with each thought, each potential obstacle, and each risk she was prepared to take. The process they had embarked on would be neither easy nor predictable. But that was what made it worth pursuing. It was in the unknown that Emily discovered her greatest strength. With the taste of defiance lingering in her mouth and a fire igniting within, Emily knew she needed to face David soon, but the thought of that confrontation stirred a mixture of nausea and resolve. "Are we ready for David?" she asked. Her voice barely above a whisper, searching for affirmation in Mike's eyes. The answer hung silently in the air, a volatile mixture of anticipation and readiness to stand her ground. Two paths lay before her, retreating back into the shadows or stepping boldly into the confrontation that awaited. It was time to confront her father. Her legacy didn't just belong to him anymore. The time had come to face the man who embodied everything she wanted to dismantle. Would this act define her as a warrior for justice, or would it deepen the chasms of familial loyalty? There was no retreating now, the future beckoned fiercely. Emily stood at the edge of her past, her resolve like iron tempered by the fires of her challenges. She had prepared herself for the impending confrontation with David, not just as a daughter but as a woman asserting her autonomy. Today would mark a pivotal juncture in her life, one where she would no longer be defined by family legacy but instead would carve out her own identity through courage and determination. As they approached David's office, she felt a steady pulse of adrenaline coursing through her veins. Mike walked beside her, a solid reminder of the united front they had become. They were no longer just partners in love, they were allies in a fight that demanded resilience. Emily took a deep breath, feeling the weight of their evidence, a collection of documented truths held tightly in her hands. The moment they entered the expensively decorated office, a sense of power washed over her. David sat behind his imposing desk, a figure draped in authority that had silenced many before her. Yet, for the first time, she felt unshackled. Her eyes locked onto David's, steady and unwavering. "We need to talk," she declared, the sheer firmness in her voice underscoring her transformation. David's expression flickered with surprise, but he quickly masked it with a calculated smile. "Emily, I didn't expect you to come here. I would thought you'd prefer to keep our family matters private." Her heart raced, but the confidence that had bloomed within her kept her grounded. "This is not a family matter anymore, David. This has become a public issue, affecting the livelihoods of many in Willow Creek." Without preamble, she laid out the evidence, the collusions, the hidden figures, the implications. She recounted compelling narratives with each pointed fact, painting a vivid picture of the impact of David's questionable decisions. Standing beside her, Mike interjected at crucial points, fortifying her claims with details that demonstrated the breadth of their findings. Together, they formed a seamless coalition, a stark contrast to the intimidated couple that once tiptoed around David's influence. As they made their case, Emily watched David's facade of composure begin to erode, agitated flickers weaving through his demeanor. "Do you think you can just walk in here and expose me?" he spat, the mask slipping further. "You have no idea what you're up against." Emily felt a thrill of empowerment. "No, David. We've uncovered exactly what you are, a man whose legacy is built on deceit. I refuse to be intimidated. I'm ready to take this to the media. I'm ready to fight for what is right." The air grew thick as their confrontation deepened, but embers of her earlier insecurities fizzled away, replaced by a sense of undeniable purpose. This was not just a fight against David, it was a reclamation of her right to define her own legacy. "Emily, think about what you're doing," he cautioned, desperation creeping into his voice. "The consequences will be dire." "Nothing compared to the destruction you've caused," she shot back, feeling a sense of triumph swell within her. "This isn't just business, it's lives. I will not be complicit in your silence." Her resolve resonated like an anthem, and she could sense the energy shift in the room. As the confrontation reached its climax, Emily witnessed a transformation in herself. A woman who had once feared disrespecting family tradition was now challenging the very foundation of that legacy. The echo of uncertain moments felt distant, the shadows of her past dissipated by the light of her courageous declaration. Finally, as the discussions reached a critical turning point, David's reaction revealed a blend of anger and apprehension. "You wouldn't dare. You're risking everything," he warned, fury mounting in his voice. "I risk nothing compared to the lives you've disrupted," she replied, her tone resolute. "We're coming for the truth." And just like that, the atmosphere electrified with subtle victory. She had stood her ground unyieldingly, transforming vulnerability into unwavering strength. No longer just the shadow of her father's legacy, Emily emerged as a driving force, ready to advocate for change. They left David's office, hearts racing but adrenaline surging with every step. Their confrontation marked more than a dispute, it represented Emily's metamorphosis into a determined advocate for justice, a woman liberated from expectations, ready to carve her own path forward. As they walked away, hand in hand, a wave of fulfillment washed over her. Emily was no longer just Mike's wife or the daughter of a powerful businessman, she was herself. She found solid confidence in her capabilities, competence forged through adversity, and an established position in her own narrative, empowering her to face whatever challenges lay ahead. This was her triumph, her achievement, a vibrant testament to the growth born of trials faced and fears conquered. Embracing the unknown with hope illuminated her path forward, and as they exited, a sense of resolved purpose ignited within. Emily was ready to act, ready to build the future that would reflect her true self, and with that, she turned to Mike, a bright smile breaking across her face. "Let's get to work." Now, as Emily's journey reached this point of monumental growth and newfound strength, it's time for you to act, too. You need to subscribe now to the channel for the next exclusive emotional stories. Don't let this moment pass you by. Leave a like now to feed the algorithm, it genuinely makes a difference. Comment below with your reactions and theories about this fierce confrontation. Share instantly this video with at least 5 friends who need to see this conclusion. Don't wait even one more second to show your support.